everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here while people are still coming in. My name is Ashley Triplett with the Digital Transformation Center, and I want to thank you all for being here today. This event will be recorded, so we will have it on our website post the event. But I wanted to say thank you to our partners, the University of Louisville Career Center, University of Louisville Student Success Center, the Employee Success Center, the University of Louisville Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning, and the University of Louisville College of Business Career Center. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ashley. My name is Chris Doherty. I'm from Google. I'm responsible for the relationship that the University of Louisville has with Google in general. Google is a massive company with lots of conversations. I handle things that people are like, I want to use Google Maps for research. I want to know about this API. I want to know about this. I have a Gmail question. I am the clearinghouse for all those scenarios for the University of Louisville, and we're very excited to be here. Thank you, Ashley and team, for the invite. Thank you for all the coordination and logistics that goes into bringing people to these rooms and having all this. It's a great hospitality, so thank you with that. Sheila, can you go to the next slide for me real quick? So quick agenda, kind of what we're going to be doing. And Sheila, next slide for me, please. So the question is, who are you people? You're obviously from Google, but who are you in general? Again, I mentioned my name is Chris. I handle I'm responsible for the relationship you have with Google from a university's perspective. We have Katie, Alice, Sheila, Charles, and Wesleyan. I'm not going to go through introductions for each of those people, but I hope that you all have a chance to work on a team like this. Work with people that are interested in education, that are interested in creating outcomes for schools in education. Everyone on this list behind me is interested in that. And again, you don't always see that when you're in the world. You have teams that are made up of a variety of people with a variety of outcomes and interests. Luckily for us in Google, this education team is specifically focused on education and passionate about it. The other part is Google's cloud division that I'm part of is not a profit center for Google in the education market. In other words, Alphabet doesn't look to Google to look to us to say, you need to make a ton of money in education. That's not our goal. Our goal is to provide resources and outcomes for universities and schools, really K through 18 and beyond in general, but it's not a profit center for us. So it's very important. So we develop our relationships like that, saying how do we help you, enable you to be a resource for you to create outcomes in education. Next slide for me, please. So here's, again, a little bit more detailed agenda of what we're gonna be doing. I'm an account manager, AKA salesperson. I'm not gonna be talking today. This is not a sales pitch. There's no related for sales pitching here. There's no pricing. There's no conversation about you should be using this because of this. The goal simply is this. We're going to have a conversation about careers, how people, what their paths are at Google, how the approach is. So for your students that are looking to potentially work at Google, we're going to have some tips and tricks for you and kind of how do people start? How does an intern go from here to a hiring manager at Google? What does that look like in general? We have a lot of students that ask us, like, hey, I'm interested in working at Google. I've got AI background. I'm a business student, but I'm an AI background. How do you work for Google? So it's an introductory to that process. And there's a great careers from higher education students with undergrads and grads to the Google job area. How does that work? So we're going to get started on that, but that's a whole day-long conversation we can definitely get into. The second part I'm really excited about Sheila showing and talking about this, it's skills. There is no hotter topic, no more prevalent topic I talk to universities about than skills. Micro-credentials, skills, reskilling. The job market in general is looking at skills. So what does Google bring to you all here at the University of Louisville when it comes to this conversation? How can a student add skills as they go through undergrad? If you're coming into school for the first time, coming back to school, et cetera, what can Google give to you that can add to your resume, that you can learn and get credentials for through your process today? So that's going to be next. We'll wrap it up with Charles and Wesleyan. Wesleyan has the dubious pleasure of working with me every single day. They are the engineering cloud architect side of this conversation. So when it comes to research, when it comes to tools that Google offers, what can you start to use today? How can you help? How can you work with your students to take Google courses and learn Google Cloud technologies? AI and ML are at the heart of what Google does. Every time you search inside a Google search, there's AI and ML working behind the scenes. So it's at the heart of what we do. So what tools are available to you in the University of Louisville to start exploring how Google handles AI and ML and other technologies across the board as well? That's our agenda. Oh, real quick, each section is going to take about 20, 25 minutes. We'll have a Q&A after each section. We'll transition into the next one from there. Questions and answers, microphone's right over there, it's live. So if you don't mind, I'll be in the front kind of keeping an eye on things, but if you have a question, feel free to step right onto that. But we'll go through the section, ask for Q&A at the end, and we'll wrap up with next steps from there. Questions, concerns, comments, winning lottery numbers, anything else? Okay, over to Katie and Alice.
Wonderful. Can you hear me? I guess.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. All right. And Katie, let's make sure that we're able to come clear from your end as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie. It's great to see you.
Great to be together with you guys. So I think we could start with just brief introductions from both of us, and then Katie and I are going to walk through some questions I have for Katie about her path, what brought her to Google, and some of the skills that have helped her be successful in her role. So I can start with my own intro. I'm Alice. I work on Katie's team and with all of the other Google folks on this call. And I work on projects and programs that help us grow Google Cloud in the higher ed and public sector world. Katie, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie, and I work closely with everybody here, and we work to help universities and governments around the world learn how to use cloud technology and to ensure the future of cloud technology is really built for everyone by everyone.
Awesome. Well, Katie, I'm wondering if you can start by sharing with the group a little bit. What brought you to Google? How did you get here?
Yeah, I'm excited to share this, and I hope I will have some good insights for folks, because not only did I navigate joining Google through the internship process, but I'm also now a hiring manager and have done probably close to 200 interviews and hired many people at Google. So I'm going to try to weave that in. And so what brought me to Google? I'll take a step back just for a little bit of my career path, because I think that can be interesting. I graduated college with a degree in literature and went to work in the finance industry, as one typically does with that skill set. I'd always had an interest in personal finance and was not convinced I wanted to have a career in literature, but I loved studying it. And so I went to work for a firm that did investment consulting for large institutions like universities and nonprofits. And it was a great mix for me to get to work with those clients. That's really what brought me there, as well as I learned a lot of really good data skills. After a few years there, I wanted to go work for a nonprofit itself, and I went to work for Citizen Schools, which is an education nonprofit headquartered in Boston that focuses on STEM education for underserved middle schools. And I also love that work. But Citizen Schools is great. It just is only in a few states. And I was thinking, how can I do this kind of work on a bigger scale? So that led me to get my MBA. I went to the Yale School of Management. And while I was there, I was thinking about what companies are really thought leaders in the world. And Google certainly came up as an amazing company to work for. And I ended up with an internship at Google. And then when I was graduating, I was really trying to decide, do I want to go back to the nonprofit world, the education world, which I really loved, or do I want to go work for a company, a big company like Google? And ultimately, I felt really good about my choice to go to Google because I think the mission of the company aligned well with who I am. And you'll hear that I was able to actually, I started out in the real estate org at Google, which I had no idea anything about real estate, but they wanted my data analytics skills there to help decide where to buy company offices, et cetera. But I worked my way over the years back to the education space. And now Alice and Sheila and I get to do this work in education, which is so near and dear to our hearts. So that was my journey.
Thank you so much for highlighting the path you've taken, Katie. I think you're, I think, a great example of how a lot of folks at Google start in or often work before they get to Google outside of tech, and come to Google with really an interesting set of experiences and backgrounds. There's no one particular profile that brings somebody here. So really great to hear your background. I'm gonna ask if there are maybe a specific project you want to share, if there's a specific project you're able to speak about that you could highlight for the group and sort of break down how that project came to be or what it is.
Sure. I mean, there's actually two projects. I'll take one from my time in the real estate org because it's always interesting, and then I'll talk a little bit about our work today. So in the real estate org, if anyone has ever lived in the Bay Area here, you will know how bad the traffic is. It is terrible. It will take you an hour to go 15 miles. And so the location of people's offices, of the employees at Google, of their offices, it mattered deeply. People were very passionate about it. And Google ran out of space, essentially, in Mountain View, which is where it started, a small town. Google became a big company. And so we started putting offices in different spots in the Bay Area. And it became hotly contested where people would move because some of the offices were several miles from each other, which meant a lot more commuting time. So in response to that, I worked with a team of engineers and we developed an internal tool where we would actually take the home addresses of all of the employees in a particular team, and we had to treat it really carefully with privacy. So everything was anonymized and really sensitive. And we could actually model the impact of moving a group of 400 engineers from location A in the peninsula down to location B, and who would be happy and who would be upset based on sort of the majority of where people lived. And it was really interesting because it took something that was very personal to people and it gave it a data-driven lens. So that project was really interesting. I'm happy to talk about another project as well.
Thanks, Katie. It's a fascinating project, and I think one thing a lot of folks might not know about Google, I think when people picture Google, like I know when my family asks me about Google, they picture like this one sort of huge campus in Mountain View. And the reality is that there are lots of Google buildings spread all throughout the Bay Area. There are Google offices in many, many states. It's a kind of a big organization with lots of locations. So if you're somebody who is interested in working at Google, but you don't think living in Mountain View is for you, know that Google is not exclusive to one campus in Mountain View. I'm wondering if you can talk about 3 skills that you think are sort of most critical for your success in your role at Google. You've been at Google for a number of years and you've really grown into really leadership roles at Google. So I'd love to hear about what you think are some of the skills that are most critical and have been critical to that success.
Yeah, this is a fun question. I won't necessarily talk about my own skills. I'll include that, but I'll also talk about the many amazing people I've worked with over the years. So the first one, and I really say this to everybody, is data analytics skills. People say that Google is a data-driven company, and so many businesses and organizations are data-driven today, and it really actually is true. If you are able to make a point with data at Google, it will just go 1,000 times further. So I'll give an example. This is in the news, so I think this is an okay one to talk about. So I'm passionate about a lot of benefits for employees. So kind of the talent side of things is something I spend some of my free time at work working on, especially issues related to women and parents. So I recently worked with some moms and we pulled some data on parental leave, for example, and what other companies were doing. And with that analysis, we were actually able to increase leave time by saying, hey, look, this is a distribution. This is an analysis, a chart. And here's where Google falls. And Google wants always, I think, to be really a leader for employees and a great place to work. And so I think we could have just said, hey, this is a mom's group and we want more leave. But when we actually came with this competitive analysis, it was really helpful. I think that's one angle. So in everything from your job to just making any sort of ask, I think having the data will always help. And being able to pull it and know how to work with data and draw conclusions from data is a critical skill. The second one I would say is openness. So that means listening to other people's voices and understanding when your idea maybe isn't actually the best one. Now, is this easy to do? No. Do I do it perfectly? No. But some of the absolute best projects and ideas that I've worked on have actually been somebody else's. And so I think that's a skill I have, is to spot the opportunities and to acknowledge if they're not my own, that's totally okay. If somebody else has an amazing idea, like, let's do it. So I think openness to hearing other voices and championing the ideas of people, sort of regardless where they're at in the org. Are they brand new and it's their second week? Are they the vice president? Doesn't matter. Let's hear all of those ideas and have that sort of culture of openness. That's something I love about the company and that I've also found to be really helpful in my own work. The last thing I'll say is fun. It's been hard maybe in the pandemic, as much as we've tried, but I think, you spend a lot of your waking hours at work. You really do. And so how do you bring more life into work? People often talk about work-life balance, but a professor of mine once asked the question, how do you bring more life into your work? How do you make sure you're working with people that you enjoy, that you have friendships with, that you connect with on a human and personal level, that you celebrate the wins, you're there for folks in the hard times, and just bringing an element, I think, of fun and human connection is something I try to do, which I think keeps me sane. And generally, I think the teams I've been on have been pretty happy teams. I think we all try for that, and it helps a lot.
I will echo just that last one and say, Katie, as someone who is on your team, I definitely do think you bring a sense of fun to your work and to the teams you're on. So completely agree, and loved getting to experience that alongside you. One thing I'd love to switch kind of gears to is talking about interviewing. So I know anybody who makes their way to Google goes through an interview process, and the interview processes can be different depending on where at Google, what kind of role you're in. But we'd love to hear a little bit about your experience interviewing at Google, and if there's any advice you have from that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So doing your research, I think, is really, really, really important, and not being afraid to reach out to social networks. This is something that I think I was privileged to have an amazing network when I was at Yale Business School, right? And social capital is something especially folks from underrepresented populations don't always have. So I will caveat this by saying, if you're a faculty, if you're a friend, and you've got some social capital that you can offer to somebody else who maybe doesn't have that around them, that's key, right? So doing my research meant two things. It meant online research. What is this role I'm interviewing for? Let me read all of the news articles. You can set up a Google News alert, for example. I have one on right now with the words workforce development, because that's what Alice and Sheila and I are working on, for example. So I did lots of research on the particular role and team. And then I did a lot of people research. Who are the people that might be on this team? And it actually all started by me asking a second-year classmate, just saying, hey, I'm really interested in this one particular team at Google. Do you happen to know anyone there? And he was like, oh, I did know someone I met last summer, connected me to them. And that connection sort of opened everything up. That connection, she told me a lot about what the role was like, gave me some tips on what to prepare, as specific as even you might get this type of question. And the questions differ by the role you're going to interview for. And so without some of that inside knowledge, it certainly would have been a harder battle. So I say that as take advantage of your networks. Don't be shy, be afraid to ask. And if you're someone fortunate enough to have that social capital, offer it to those around you and try to help others. Let's see. I think there's a question as well about.
I'm happy to move you into that one. I think if you spend time interviewing at Google as well, and probably are very familiar being on the other side of the table now, or virtual table, as many interviews are right now. So I'm curious if you, in your interviewing process of interviewing candidates at Google, are there some common mistakes you see or things you'd sort of remind people just to be aware of and thoughtful of?
Yeah, I think this is great. And I know we have a mix of sort of faculty and students here today. And so I think advising people around this is always helpful. I think, again, that research component comes in, and tactically what that means is really customizing your resume. When I see a resume come across my desk and it looks just like the resume that person probably sent to 10 different companies for 10 different roles, but it's the exact same resume, I'm usually pretty disappointed. What I want to see is highlighted experience that really ties to the role I'm hiring for, right? So if I'm hiring for a role in the education sector within Google, even if you haven't worked in the education sector, what have you done that's related to that? Do you have an interest in that? Do you volunteer at your local school? Can you put something on there that just shows me you read my job description and you care? I will always pick the resume that has a few things about education over the one that doesn't, all other things being equal, right? So show me that you've customized things. And then I think in the interview, it's really just about those critical thinking skills. So I want to see how you think. Sometimes people try to answer a question very literally, and they think that there's a right answer. And I'll say most of the time, the interview questions at Google, there isn't a single right answer. There's some key themes we might want to hear you talk about, but really we want to hear your thought process. So this is great for like anything with math and numbers. If you get a hypothetical about, what percent of the business would be XYZ in this country, there's not necessarily a number. Sometimes I see people give me an actual number for the answer, and that's usually not what we're looking for. We want to see how would you break down a problem step by step and actually basically talk out loud how you're thinking. And it's okay to take a little time to write your thoughts down and walk your interviewee through that thought process. So don't necessarily take things literally. Show your thought process. It's okay to ask questions. Your interviewee and interviewer can really have sort of a partnership in the best interviews and have an open dialogue. Those are the most fun interviews as well.
I love that answer. And to just emphasize one thing you shared, one thing I see when I'm interviewing candidates, or I guess a common mistake maybe, or maybe just an assumption is that folks often jump right into the answer. They feel like they have to get right to answering right away. And I always try to emphasize to anybody I'm interviewing, if you want to take a minute to put your answer together and think about how you want to respond or organize your thoughts, go right ahead. There's no points deducted for taking time to think. So I always, not that there are points at all, but I just always try to remind people that the time is yours. And if you want to take a moment to get organized, that's totally fine. So I totally agree, Katie. Thanks for sharing those that advice on things that folks I think might want to know about interviewing. Staying on the finding a role and applying for a role at Google, you've already mentioned some really great tips. So I think you've covered, really customizing your resume to show the most relevant experience for the role that you're applying for. I'm curious if you have any other thoughts. Another piece of advice you gave was about really finding folks in your network who might be able to offer good advice or good relationships. And then I'm curious if you have any other tips for finding the right role or applying for roles at Google.
I do. I have one more tip, Alice, and this one is a bit of real talk. Just doing the math, Google gets millions of applications a year. It is a very sort of typically a competitive process to get a job at a place like Google. And so the hard truth that I tell people is it's not your time to career switch, most likely, unless you've got an amazing in or a connection or you get pretty lucky. But I've talked to many, many recruiters in my years at Google, and really they are looking for the person with the most relevant skills for the job. And so sometimes I hear people say, hey, I'm currently in more of an analytics role and I really want to switch into marketing. Can I go ahead and apply for a marketing role at Google? And they might have a great background. They have had, they have a great education. They've got fantastic experience, but it's not marketing experience. They're just not going to make it to the top of the pile when there's a whole bunch of other marketing resumes. And so again, it kind of goes back to that customization. You almost want your recruiter to look at your resume and say, wow, what a perfect fit for this job. And so that means you want to find a job where you can say, I have this experience. I will make one point. I know there have been some studies done that that women typically, when they apply to roles, will think they need every single qualification, like 100% of the qualification. And something about men, when they look at roles, they think they may need fewer for the same job. And sometimes that means people don't feel comfortable applying if they're not qualified. I don't want to make that point, but the point is you should be like the majority of those things, you should feel comfortable. If there's one or two things you don't know, especially if they're in that preferred qualification, still apply. It's more about, do you fit overall with that role? Would someone look at your background and say, yes, you have relevant experience? It's not about checking every single box. It's about relevant experience. So targeting a role where you're like, yes, I have done this before. I know this world. That will just give you a lot of advantage in the process.
Thanks, Katie. I really appreciate that advice, and I've seen it be true as well. So it's very solid and good advice. I'm going to switch gears a little bit off of the sort of finding a job or applying to job or interviewing for job topics, and instead find out what you think, what's your advice for students or people who are currently at university. I think we have a mix of students and faculty out there in the audience. I hope we're right. You guys are very small in my camera, so hope I can't quite tell, but if you have advice for folks who are in university, even if there are faculty here in the room, they can pass that along. So curious what you think.
Yeah, you're going to hear some themes in my talking today. But I would say taking some time to get up to speed in terms of quantitative skills and tech skills is actually really important. And I may be biased where I sit, but we also do research on this, right? My team is looking at workforce data every day. That is what we do. By 2030, 1 billion jobs around the globe, this according to the World Economic Forum, are going to turn from essentially non-digital jobs to digital jobs. This is huge. It is called sort of the fourth industrial revolution. And that means that there are just going to be a lot more jobs where being comfortable with technology and being comfortable with data are core. Now, that's already happening today. And I personally felt really glad that I had some of that data experience early in my career. It sort of got me everywhere. That first job in the finance world that I somehow managed to sneak into as a literature major. And so that really, really helped. So that doesn't mean you need to be a computer science major if that's not your passion. It does mean, I think, getting some exposure, like a computer science 101, like a basic programming class. I almost feel everyone should at least have exposure to now. It's sort of like a basic math class, basic English class. Everybody should have a basic programming class, as well as getting comfortable with using data. So working with large sets of data and drawing conclusions, making visuals out of data. I think that is, my daughter is 3.5, right? But when she gets a little bit older, I'm really going to encourage her to do that because I think that will be critical to get high paying jobs going forward.
Thanks for that. Yeah, we're definitely seeing, I think for all of us and around us, we see that the world is digitizing. I mean, thinking even we would have been probably doing this fireside chat with you all in person a few years back. And just the fact that even this conversation is digital, I think is a great example of how how our world is changing and the way that jobs will change with it. We're coming here into the home stretch. I'm at my second to last question for you. So I'm curious if you can share what gets you excited about going to work every day and what helps you feel really jazzed or excited about each day of work.
Oh, such a good question. I think there's two things that motivate me, and I'm gonna and it's people, but the word people in two different ways. So the first is the people that I get to work with. Definitely missed seeing people in person these last 2 years. I think many of us have, but I think the people at Google are just so smart and passionate about what they do, and everybody on this call who I've had a chance to work with is an incredible example of that. This is a wonderful team. So I'm really excited by the people. That's probably the answer that 99% of people at Google will give you. I always hear people say that. The second way I want to use the word people is more about the impact side. On days where I'm tired and just like, oh man, would love to sleep in, I do think that it's really motivating, the work that we get to do. Our team this year helped faculty at over 1,000 universities around the globe teach cloud in the classroom. And we feel really excited about giving that access to students everywhere, again, because we know those jobs are coming. They're here today. They're really lucrative jobs. And so getting that knowledge into people's hands, I think, is really motivating. So the impact of our work is great. The scale is phenomenally huge, and I'm humbled by it every day. And the human beings I've grown to really know who sit right near me, either virtually or in person, those are the key things.
Awesome. Well, I share a lot of that excitement with you, and it is really motivating, I think, to feel like our work helps others, and at the end of the day, that is essential for me too. Okay, last question. We've made it to the finish line of our questions, and we're going to turn it over to those of you in the audience for your questions. So, Katie, I think I froze for a second. Am I good? Okay. If you could turn back time to when you were in university, what is one piece of advice you wish you could give to yourself? I know we did your general advice for those in university, but what about for you in particular?
Yeah. Oh, it's such a good question. I think just being open to the unexpected, because life has taken so many interesting turns, and just going where your interest is. And in many ways, this sort of happened naturally, but I think I was always concerned, am I going in the right direction? Am I picking the right thing? And so it would have been great to have my future self say, you know what, take that class about opera. That was, by the way, one of my favorite undergrad classes. And I was like, should I take this? Is this going to get me a job? And the answer was, I don't know if it got me a job, but it was one of the most memorable classes I've ever taken. And on the side, I was still crunching numbers and reading about finance, and I was able to get that job, as I said. And so, following your personal interests, I think, and not feeling any guilt about that, and just going in those directions and being open and being opportunistic as a learner. If you're excited to learn something, I think it's a sign that you should go learn it. And don't worry so much about the details. You'll probably end up in a great place. So that would be the advice I'd give to myself.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much about your own experiences, your thoughts on the hiring and interviewing process at Google, and sort of the motivation you have and what energizes you for work. I think now we'll turn it over to those of you in the audience in case you have questions. We're happy to answer, and we'll open it up to the floor.
Let's see if this was fun.
Mike. Nope. Maybe, sort of.
Yes, we can hear the mic.
Really? It works?
I hear you.
Wow, I'm shocked. I figured there would be a couple steps and people to call at this point there. So, all right, cool. Come on, if you don't mind, come over to the microphone over here. Fingers crossed, we're still technically working on that one as well, but they should be able to hear you and ask your question. Let's go from there.
Hello?
Maybe.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, good, good. Yay. My name is Hannah. Thank you so much for talking through some of those points. One of the things that I personally struggle with is this idea of feeling intimidated, especially if I'm walking into an interview room. I know that the people I'm going to be interviewed by are experts in their field. So what do you do to overcome that feeling, and how do you prepare to walk in the room?
Alice, you should feel welcome to answer these too. Would you like to take a stab?
Sure, I'm happy to. Hannah, I can definitely relate to that. I often feel that way myself, and it's something I've managed throughout my career too. Usually, one thing I try to do is give myself a little bit of a pep talk before an interaction like that. I remind myself that I'm going to be in the room because my opinion and what I have to say is valued. If it wasn't, then I probably wouldn't be there. And so I think that that's one thing I tell myself. I also tell myself that experience isn't the only thing that kind of gives you the legs to stand on your opinion. You also might just have a really great idea. And even if you don't have a ton of experience, that idea is really valuable. So I give myself this pep talk often before I'm going into a context like the one you mentioned. And I also just remind myself that nervousness is probably just excitement about how I'm feeling, and excitement for being a part of that conversation. So those are my thoughts or how I approach it. Katie, anything else from you?
Yeah, I love that, Alice. That's great. I definitely go in the bathroom and like put my hands on my hips and like try to do that power pose thing. I don't know if it's been debunked or what, but it just works for me. So find that thing that psychs you up, whether it's Alice's pep talk, it's my power pose, and I just hold it for like a minute, and it just gives me good vibes. I think the other thing I do is I rigorously prepare. I really do. I write down answers to common questions. Like I pretend I'm the interviewer. What would I ask myself? Again, with some of that like social networking, I try to get a sense of common questions and try to prep them out. And then I also talk them out loud with myself. And sometimes I have somebody else give me a mock interview. Honestly, sometimes that makes me more nervous, but I always write it out or talk it out myself. And then the last thing I will say, a little known secret of a hiring manager, as I said, I've probably done 200 plus interviews at Google in my time. And I cannot tell you how many times somebody in that interview has an amazing idea, as Alice said, when I ask them, how do you solve a problem? And usually it's a real problem that we're working on it in work, right? And I want their ideas, and I'll write it down and be like, that is a great idea. We should look into that. We should investigate that. So more often than not, I'm learning something from you when I'm interviewing you. And I'm pretty impressed by that. And so just remember, yeah, like Alice said, you're there for a reason. You've got a lot to offer, and just psych yourself up to get confident, however that may be for you. Great question. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you so much.
Hannah, the other thing you'll notice too, you can go sit down if you want to, but the other thing notice, it's not even interviews. Leadership inside of your organization is going to change on a regular basis. It just did for me a little while ago, where my boss's 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 boss wanted to have a conversation with me about a client. And I'm like, I've never met this person before. I've heard her on talking, but it's almost an interview because this is my first interaction with her. So those same techniques can apply to you just in a conversation in your next step. So it's very similar to getting all my details lined up. I got my document built, all my questions done. So you'll have those kind of things. But I just remind yourself they're people. Oh, yeah. Katie's a person. Alice is a person. They have emotions and feelings. They're also trying to have the interview go well for you. So the dynamic's going to be there either way. So it's a great question, by the way. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think for me personally, it's I find myself wondering what the balances of knowing this is a hiring manager, but this is also a person. So knowing like when I can actually open up about like my personality versus when I need to be purely like professional and talk about the skill set that I feel I'm qualified for. But just finding that balance and walking in the room is just taking that first step is a bit of a hesitance there. So
great topic for conversation. So glad.
Thank you.
Of course. Anybody else from the room want to join in? Please step up here at the mic. We got a couple more minutes of Q&A. So
Hi, I'm Ashley. I have a question on data analytics skills that you mentioned. Is there any particular program or visualization software that you would recommend to candidates that are interested in working at Google?
Oh, good question, Ashley. I love this one. So the core skill set for, I think, that's applicable to almost everyone, right? Whether you're like a business analyst or you're an engineer, I think is SQL today. I really do. When I was in my undergrad, it was more about spreadsheet work, and spreadsheets are important, right? Google Sheets, Excel, there's a variety of reasons. Knowing the logic, like how to write a formula. But I do think it's evolved. Our data sets are bigger. They are big. And so SQL as a tool will help you process a larger data set. From like a Google perspective, BigQuery is something we use all the time. It's a great product. I like it a lot. And so that's a good one to look at. You can access it. There's like sample data sets. So things like census, what are baby names? The most common baby names every year is a free public data set within BigQuery. And I always tell people to play around with it because it's fun. You can look at your name. How popular was it in 1960? What was the #1 boy's name in 1970? And you can just kind of query that data. And then in terms of visualization, there's so many different options. Again, like we use all sorts of products here and really at all companies, but we've got Data Studio as our internal. People will use Tableau as well, which is nice. And then R as kind of a tool is also really useful. It's a little bit more advanced. R and Python are kind of those next steps up for folks, I think, that are looking to get a little past basic business analysis into some of the more sophisticated tools. I hope that helps. Do you want to add anything, Alice?
I was just going to add 2 offerings that Google has that could be helpful. One is if you search Google Data Analytics Certificate, there's a Coursera certificate that a lot of folks are taking. Google has a bunch of certificates that were basically developed to help people internally get certified and prepped. So that's one path you could check out. And then another offering you might want to check out is if you search Google Cloud Data Analyst. There's a track that helps people get trained on how to use Google Cloud for data analysis. So those are just 2 paths that we have that might be useful for you as well.
This is the most amazing transition ever. Your question to the next topic, by the way. So any other follow-up from that question?
Did someone prepare this? Because it's perfect.
Excellent. Thank you for your question. Appreciate it. So could you repeat the tools, Katie, that you talked about specifically?
Yes. Oh, Katie, go ahead.
The tool side, yes. And so at a high level, I think like spreadsheets and knowing logic functions is a great base. SQL is what I would think will really be the core to learn SQL language. And then sort of at the more advanced level, tools like R and Python can be useful. From a visualization standpoint, I think there's a variety of tools that you can use. Some of the Google has Data Studio, for example, and Tableau is another similar great tool. From the analysis perspective, BigQuery is a great product that you can go and play around, for example, with that census data for free, and mess around with it. Does that answer the question?
I think so. We're getting head nods, which is good. And then we're going to actually cover some of those topics towards the end when Wesley actually steps up and starts to talk. And there'll be some links. And by the way, I'm sorry, this deck will come to you all too. So the references, the links, everything we talk about will be available. So, okay. Next topic. So again, we're going to move on. So Sheila, if you don't mind introducing yourself, a little bit of your background and what you'll be talking about today. I'm really excited to hear and have this team hear what you're about to talk about.
Thank you. And thank you, Katie and Alice. That was a really interesting. I love hearing people's paths to Google. It's always fascinating to hear what brought everyone together. I am so honored to be with all of you today and to kind of build off of what my colleagues just shared with all of you. My name is Sheila, and I work alongside Katie and Alice in Google's public sector organization. My role is really to help institutions like yourselves or any institution in the public sector prepare everyone for the careers of tomorrow. So I'm very excited to walk through what we have to offer in this space. To To start, I'll share a little bit about myself. Much like Katie and Alice, I also took a non-traditional path into Google. I am a political science major and I went to law school. Thought I was going to be a great lawyer. Turns out I didn't want to be a lawyer. And so now I've made my way over to the cloud. So I really do passionately believe that digital skills are for everyone, even for people like myself with very little tech background. Great. So Google fundamentally believes that the biggest asset in this room, the biggest asset at the University of Louisville is all of you, the people that the institution represents. And while we do believe that the right technology is critical in the jobs of today and tomorrow, we think empowering all of you to use that technology is really what matters most. So we really see a campus where students, teaching faculty, researchers, and administrative staff are all empowered to thrive. We think that higher ed institutions, classrooms, and labs are the best place to see this transformation. Okay, so to start, I'm going to caveat the rest of this presentation by saying there's a lot of information coming your way, so don't get overwhelmed. But if you can only take away one thing from this whole presentation, it's that whether you're a student, a faculty member, a researcher, or a member of campus administration, there are free resources that we have available to you to get hands-on experience, curriculum, and industry-recognized credentials for digital skilling. I'll share those resources at the end, but first let's cover what our vision is for the students in this room. So I can tell you that one of the first things on the top of my mind when I left law school early was, how can I make myself employable? And today that question is even more important than ever. We know that 3 out of 4 IT decision makers report a skills gap in the market, and they're unable to find qualified talent to fill the open roles in their organization. For the second year in a row, the #1 reason that they gave is that technological change is outpacing skills development programs. Between 2019 and 2021, job postings looking for cloud skills grew 41%, almost 41%. And Google Cloud skills are in particularly high demand right now, and they command the top 2 paying IT certifications in 2021 in the US. So students, getting digital skills is not just important, it's essential. And for the educators in the room, you are uniquely positioned to help prepare your students to fill this growing skills gap in the market. Today, I'm going to be obviously focusing on the university offerings that we have, but we also do have resources for learners outside of higher ed. Okay, so Google partners with employers and educational institutions across the globe to train and prepare the future workforce for technology careers. We have offerings to meet people wherever they are, whether they're new to technology or already have previous industry or educational experience. For those that are just starting out, we offer foundational training and accessible career certificates. And you heard from Katie and Alice about data analytics, but we also have IT support, UX design, project management, just to list a few. We have over 150 major employers in the Grow with Google Employer Consortium who connect with skilled candidates in these certificates to grow their own talent pipelines. So let's say you're a psych major and you don't think that you have a tech background, but you do want to get a little bit of experience crunching data for analysis in your work, then the data science career certificate is a perfect place to start, for example. And given the criticality of cloud to the future of technology and then the massive demand that we're seeing for cloud talent worldwide, we also have a special focus on cloud computing training. Those offerings are kind of best suited for students with some background in computing, so a computer science major, for example. All right, I will start with the career certificates. These are the entry-level certificates and where they may benefit you most. Okay, so what are career certificates? We have a suite of Google career certificates, and they are designed to provide job seekers with access to high-paying, high-growth careers without the need for a college degree in the fields of data analytics, IT support, project management, and user experience. These certificates are proven to get people dramatic wage gains at scale. And as an example, about half of our graduates enter the program making less than 30K, And in 3 to 6 months, they are making it on average 55K or more, so dramatic gains. And then, in our studies, we've seen that 82% of career certificate graduates are reporting positive career impact within 6 months. So I'm going to share some examples of how these are bringing talent into tech. Career certificates have been a proven strong entry point for non-traditional talent coming into tech. I gave that example earlier of data analytics. It is the #1 most popular professional certificate on Coursera, and then that's closely followed by #2, which is the Google IT Support Certificate. The program graduates a really high percentage from non-traditional backgrounds, and learners can share their certificate in the certification section of their LinkedIn profile, on printed resumes, on CVs, or any other document. So they are industry recognized, and they are great ways to kind of show off the skills that you've been building. I mentioned that we have over 150 big employers that you can then connect with after earning these certificates. And they are interested and committed to hiring the talent that comes out of these programs. So to give you a small sample, I'm going to run through a bunch of examples here. To give you a small sample of the jobs that you'll be qualified for with these certificates, this is a common question, like what can I do with this certificate? The data analytics cert will qualify you for roles like associate data analyst, data technician, junior data analyst, scientist, or marketing analyst. The IT support career certificate qualifies you for roles like database administrator, IT support specialist, help desk technician, or system analyst. Project management, this is another popular one, and it will qualify you for roles like project manager, scrum master, project coordinator, operations manager, and that's just, again, a sampling of some of the careers that you'll be qualified for. And then the UX design career certificate will qualify you for roles like UX designer, UI designer, product designer, visual designer, and the list goes on. So now transitioning to slightly more advanced learning offerings for those of you with some computer science background, we have learning paths and skill badges offered through our Google Cloud Skills Boost. And you might be wondering, what is Skills Boost? So we recently launched the Google Cloud Learning Platform, and that's called the Google Cloud Skills Boost. It includes our entire catalog of over 700 labs, courses, and certification prep resources. These are all authored by Google Cloud, and they're all housed in one destination. Faculty that are in the room, your students can build and then validate the in-demand skills that we know employers are looking for that they will need after graduation. One of my favorite features of the Google Cloud Skills Boost are the role-based learning paths. You can select the learning path that reinforces the content that you're teaching in the classroom, and your students will then be guided in a complementary way through the applicable labs, courses, and resources. They can collect badges and credentials along the way that demonstrate their proficiency in those skills. Here is a view of kind of the learning paths. We've curated nearly 20 different learning paths that are designed to focus learning and prepare your students for specific job roles. The learning paths include a series of both labs and courses. The hands-on labs give your students practical experience needed to become proficient, and then the courses prepare them with the knowledge and context they need to leverage those new skills. There are lots of options, and I know it's overwhelming, so we recommend 4 in particular that have been very popular to get your students started. There's getting started with Google Cloud, and that's, as it sounds, an introduction to the fundamentals of the cloud, and a really great place to start before pursuing a specific job path. There's then Cloud Digital Leader, which are 4 courses designed to help students with the ability to articulate the benefits of the cloud. And this is really designed for tech adjacent folks in business. And the path is in preparation for the Cloud Digital Leader certification. And then the third one that we recommend is Cloud Engineer. This is a series of courses and labs designed to help students prepare for the Associate Cloud Engineer certification. And then finally, this is a common theme that you're hearing a lot about, Data Analyst. And that includes content on analyzing and gleaning insights from data. And it's a really nice next step after the data analyst career certification. Okay. And next, I'll talk about skill badge credentials. And these are really, you can think of skill badges as like micro credentials. These are stackable, bite-sized bits of learning. They take about 3 to 6 hours to complete, and they are really great to be able to display your skills as you're moving through the more complicated advanced courses. And these are an example of some of the different skill badges that are available to you. Okay, now taking a step back, I'm going to move into more of the advanced offerings that we have. We just walked through what we think of as the ways in for different learners, the different learners at the University of Louisville. We also think that everyone stands to benefit from upskilling themselves in the cloud. So we've just talked about kind of those ways in and moving through the learning path of those Grow with Google certifications all the way up to these much more advanced Google Cloud certificates. In our research, we've heard over and over again that organizations struggle to ramp up their team skills when people across the organization are at different skill levels and have diverse learning preferences. Some folks in the organization, some of the IT professionals around might be AWS certified professionals. And then some of you may not know what a container is. Some may excel at self-directed learning, and some are really thrive in a classroom environment. We have learning paths that really meet the needs of all the different types of learning preferences. For students and instructors and staff that are really ready to take the next step to build on existing foundational technical skills, we have Google Cloud certifications. And this is really like leveling up to the much more professional skills that employers are looking for. So this is where university learners that are eager to go a level deeper earn tangible industry recognized certifications alongside their 4-year degree. We know that this really helps increase their learning potential. This is a stackable view here of the different cloud computing trainings that we offer, from our newest Cloud Digital Leader certification all the way up to our career readiness trainings for the most advanced learners. Okay, I just threw a lot of information at you, and probably the most important thing that I hope you take away from all of this, I'm going to wrap up with the good stuff. How can you get started? What is available to you today to start taking advantage of our learning offerings? So to start, we have this landing page for Google Cloud EDU, and I would start there. I would really kind of think of 3 types of resources that we have to kickstart your learning. The first is credits. So we offer free teaching credits for faculty, lab credits for student learners. So you can go to this site and navigate by your role or your interest. So if you're a student looking for lab credits, you can navigate by that path. Or if you're a faculty member looking for teaching credits, you can select faculty as your role. The second type of benefit that we offer is curriculum to support your classroom experience. And if you can use it to teach in the classroom if you're a teaching faculty, or move independently through the material if you're a student. And the third type of resource that we offer are those credentials that we talked about, recognition for the learning that employers really want to see. And with that, I will end my presentation and leave a few moments for questions.
Thank you, Sheila. Can you hear this one still? Microphone working? Oh, yes, 2 for 2. That's not bad. I figured that at some point we'd turn it off. This topic right here, which is, hey, what does Google Cloud offer me as a student, faculty, researcher, IT admin? Those are the 4 groups we talk to, that I talk to on a regular basis on campus. This area right here is the first thing that we're looking for. How do I get knowledge? How do I get information? How do I get started to even understand what Google offers in this area? By the way, Google Cloud Platform is a direct competitor to AWS and Azure. So when you think about that, I know that Microsoft also has a great relationship with you all. You have a lot of resources. So just for comparison's sake, so what is Google's AI and ML approach to the cloud? What resources can I use as a faculty member? I need to learn. I want to do on-demand training. we provide credits via this process right here for you all as a student or faculty or IT admin to actually go through Coursera courses, we call Quick Lab courses, Skills Boost, to actually get access to and learn about what Google Cloud does from that perspective. There are enough credits. I think there's 200 credits to get you through an entire pathway. By the way, the following year, you can sign back up again. We're not, I mentioned it early on, Google's not here to create a profit center from this process. We're here for you all to take advantage of courses and credits to learn, to enable students moving forward to have these skills so they're more employable. The skills badges we talked about, you get plenty of credits to go through and actually put that stamp on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile to when you leave. So the idea simply is you probably didn't know these existed. One of my goals I mentioned very early on is how do I increase the relationship the University of Louisville has with Google? That's my goal. Here's the best way in my mind to get started on to where you actually can impact your students today with these skills and what you actually want to accomplish. So Sheila, that was kind of my additive thought process to what we do. But obviously we covered a lot of things and what Grow with Google's doing. Obviously the skills badge conversation, micro-credentialing is the topic I hear about most often. And they're asking me, what is Google doing in this area? That's what Sheila just kind of covered for y'all. So let me stop there. I apologize. This is supposed to be Q&A and I'm chatting. I apologize. Any questions from the room? If so, you know, I'm stepping over to the mic here or raise your hand and please come on over. If you don't mind just introducing yourself and then what your question is would be amazing. Thank you.
My name is Chakram Jayanti. I'm Chair of Physics and Astronomy. I just want to find out if Google Collaboratory or Google Notebook is part of this, because that's important for teaching, right? I mean, you can use Python or Jupyter Notebook along with that. And if faculty members have to get trained on how to use Google Collaboratory, is it part of that training? Is it?
Great question. It was really funny. We were talking about Colab earlier this morning before the whole process started. So Wesley and Charles are going to go next and talk about Colab a little bit. But to that point, you're getting 200 credits. Let's just call them 200 credits. You can take any pathway or any course you want to, right? The skill badges are set up for, hey, I want to accomplish this outcome. So what courses should I take to accomplish that outcome? But as a faculty member or as a student, you really have the full catalog open to you. And yes, there are Jupyter Notebook conversations and resources in there. And then our documentation, honestly, is pretty good. You know, we actually do publish public-facing documentation on all of our services, and it's really well done. So I encourage you to kind of do a combination, look at the documentation, take the on-demand training courses, and build from that perspective.
Okay, thanks.
Of course.
Thanks, Chris.
Sure, Sheila, no problem. Anybody else? Questions, concerns, comments, winning lottery numbers? My common joke. Come on over.
Hello, I'm Beth Willey. I am a professor in the English department and a vice provost for undergraduate education. So I was really excited actually to hear the earlier presenter's declaration that she was a literature major but dabbled in finance. Like, yes, we can do anything. English majors. Yes, exactly. I just, as your presenter just said, this is really interesting because I was not aware of many of these resources, even though I've been involved with our Digital Transformation Center. So I'm really glad to hear about these. I am a little curious about time investments. Many of our students are very busy. They have part-time jobs along with full-time coursework. And I'm looking at some of these things that say, 40 hours, 60 hours, or something like that. So for someone from my background who really believes indeed that we need to help students gain these skills, I'm having a hard time conceiving how we present them to students in such a way that they feel doable, that there's time in their schedules for these things. So if you could talk a little bit about where we start with these things, especially for the students who aren't computer science majors, that would be very useful to us, I think.
That's a great question. Katie, do you mind if I put you on the spot? Because I know you and I have talked about just that in terms of like investments, where do I insert, what is the outcomes? Because everyone's going to say, whatever hours I put in, what is the outcome of said effort? Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. I can take it and then I'll kick it to Sheila if she has anything to add. It's such a good question, and your students and your faculty's time is limited, right? And so what we see work really well for universities, and as I said, we've got over 1,000 universities around the world. Many of your peer institutions are using these programs. Is there two paths. There's the adjacent to your class, where it's sort of for extra credit for students who are really motivated. But then there's the integrated into curriculum. And I think that's going to be the right path for your university based on what you're saying, is when you can actually integrate an industry credential directly into coursework, right? Whether it's that intro to political science class, and let's integrate some of these data analytics coursework pieces into the classroom as homework assignments, as part of that curriculum. I think that really is powerful. And then you've got a community of people all going after that same milestone to get a credential, to get certified, to get a skill badge, something that the student can walk away with at the end of the semester and put that on their resume. They've got that badge, they've got that credential, and that can, I think, give a lot of confidence. We have a team of implementation experts, and that's what we do is we go into universities and we talk with faculty about how do we actually integrate some of these offerings directly into the classroom. And so we see that work really well as kind of a time saver to get the industry credentials in there, but also sometimes a time saver for faculty, because we have a team of experts at Google who make sure that this content, for example, our cloud curriculum content, every 6 months, they're going in and updating it to make sure it is the most up to date on the latest tech. And will all of your faculty members have time to do that? Not necessarily, right? And so that's something we hire a team of professionals to do specifically as a time saver to faculty who are teaching cloud, for example. But again, there's things like data analytics where we have that curriculum for you. It's great to basically almost any 101 class where there's potentially numbers involved that can be integrated with really powerful outcomes. And I think Sheila alluded to this, but we see real dollar impact for students upon graduating in the realm of $15,000 to $20,000+ increases in terms of potential entry-level salary you can get if you have, for example, some of those data analytics skills. We can share some of that data after, but it's quite motivating and powerful, I think, for students to see that they can increase their earning power with reasonably limited effort, especially if it's integrated in the class. Anything
Katie,
else to add, Sheila?
I will add just two small notes, and Katie summarized it very, very well, but we have as well two paths that we call career readiness. They're 16-week courses that are guided by faculty, and it's meant for the classroom. It really is meant to be led by a faculty member for a cohort of students as part of the curriculum. And we provide all the resources for it. We find that that works really well. There's one in data analytics, and then there's one for the associate cloud engineer. And that is again, a guided program. And then, as you mentioned, we know students have limited time, which is why we hope that we can start introducing them to some of these more complicated and time-consuming certifications with those bite-sized skill badges, 3 to 6 hours, to see if those learning paths make sense for them, and then decide if they want to make a larger investment time-wise.
I think kind of what Katie mentioned too, Sheila, at the end, which is, why would I bother do this? What's the point? What was the outcomes that I could potentially see? $15,000 to $20,000 is significant for a new first job, right? Or even a second job, coming back to it. So it's almost part advertising to say, okay, I'm going to put 3 to 6 hours involved in this skill badge, and it's going to do what for me, right? So making sure that we have that document, or that we'll call marketing material, we'll call it, for you. Also for your faculty member, what would the student outcome, right? If you're helping those students do this, this is why 3 to 6 hours in a skill badge makes much sense. And Sheila, I think your point about stackable, you mentioned it a couple times. If I'm this type of student, start here. It's small, it's bite-sized, it's 6 hours, which, let's be, students are stressed. There's a lot going on, but 6 hours, here's the outcome we're going to help you drive. And then from there, if you're interested, what Katie talked about, weave your way into the next level, next stackable item. Might be this year's junior year, senior year. So you graduate with associate cloud engineer certificate, which is major. If you get a professional certificate when you leave undergrad or grad, that's a major thing for us to look at. Weslin's going to be talking next. She has 2, and she's looking at adding more in her role. So I think those are the kind of things. To your point, though, timing, right? Effort. What's the outcome? What's the effort look like? How do I instill it? So, great topic. Other items before we move on? Okay. Thank you, Sheila, as usual. I appreciate it. So Weslin, over to you, please.
All right. Can everyone hear me, see me? All right.
Yes, check and check.
Okay. And okay, I guess I'll present real quick. Okay. Sorry, this is probably gonna be the same screen. Can you all see the that same slide?
Yep.
Okay, awesome, great. All right, so we're gonna start with a intro to cloud computing and the Google Cloud Platform. Before I get into that, though, I wanted to introduce myself and my colleague, Charles Elliott. So I'm Weston Church. I'm a customer engineer here at Google Cloud for Education. I have the pleasure of working with Chris, who I hope you have all met by now. As far as my background, I'm a relatively recent graduate of the University of California, Santa Cruz. In that, I studied technology and information management and global economics. I'll say go Slugs if anybody is former UC Santa Cruz graduate. And really, actually, I didn't really start in the cloud computing world. I started in the IT support world, contracting with the U.S. Geological Survey. But during my studies, I always had a real interest of, where is technology moving? Where, as a business major, right, how can I leverage technology to create value, create better outcomes? How can we use this for the public good as well? So that was really, at the forefront of my mind as I was graduating college. I had the lucky opportunity to join Google in 2018 as a IT support technician in our Tech Stop program. They have a new name for it now. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but I know they are hiring. So Chris, I will get that information to you to share with folks. And it was, a really great experience being part of that program, being part of a global team, getting to solve problems for people across the world with, their technology needs, getting to interface with all the different teams here at Google. It was really quite a great experience and, a great intro to my career. I also wanted to kind of plus one what Sheila was saying, where I didn't do it myself, but I had a colleague who was part of my cohort that did the IT support certificate. And it got them from working in the service industry into doing that role, and then now they're actually a site reliability engineer here at Google. So it's really a rocket ship for your career when you think about it that way. So during my career as part of the IT support role, I got the chance to do a rotation with the Google Cloud customer engineering team based out of Sunnyvale, working with small medium businesses up to corporate size, which is, I think, pretty much businesses about like over 100 employees or so. And so really that was really awesome to see, the impact of cloud in our world and, on small medium businesses. How can we create more value, et cetera. But having worked a little bit in the public sector world before, I think that's really cool. But I also, how can I be involved to create more impact in my own community, in the world? I found that really interesting, and luckily I got the chance to join as part of the Google Cloud Higher Education team. So I'm going to pass this over to Charles. You want to do a quick introduction?
Yep. Hey, everybody. Charles Elliott. So I'm actually based in Atlanta. I've been a longtime Google fanboy, and am so fortunate to be here now as a Google employee. And I want to just kind of echo all the things I think the team here kind of expressed about everything as it relates to looking at the career opportunities that are out there, whether it's cloud, AI, ML, data and analytics. The market is just, going nuts for data. And one of the things I'm excited to talk to everyone about today is kind of how do we, as Google, look to help, customers and whether you're a faculty or a student, kind of engage with data through the Google Cloud and other resources that we provide. Weston, do we have any other slides we need to show?
No, so we got the normal slides right there, and then we'll switch over to kind of the intro, talk about what we're going to talk about. So we kind of have 5 main topics here. What is the cloud and why is it important? We'll talk a little bit about compute on GCP, the data AI landscape. We'll talk a little about actually exploring the Google Cloud Console and using BigQuery, then also some additional tools to consider. So moving on to what is the cloud and why is it important? Some of you may or may not be already familiar with the cloud. Cloud computing, as defined by Google, is the on-demand availability of computing resources as services over the internet. It eliminates the need for enterprises to procure, configure, or manage resources themselves, and they only pay for what they use. Which that's cool and all, but that's a little boring, right? You know, what does this actually mean? What this really means is that allows you to focus on making your product better, getting your research done faster, automating your service, while also reaping the benefits in terms of scalability, reliability, performance, feature agility, compliance, and security. Now, why is that important? I've got an interesting use case to talk to you about. 160 billion records every month, right? That's a lot. Now imagine that was how many records your platform had to ingest in real time. And that was exactly the problem that Hal and the team at the Purdue Joint Transportation Research Program were dealing with. Hal is a senior software engineer and researcher doing traffic research to analyze roads and help make them safer, and partner with a company called Wejo, which takes real-time de-identified data from connected vehicles. These are kind of your more modern vehicles, which are essentially, you know, computers on wheels. And that data is de-identified and includes stuff like heartbreaking data, windshield wiper usage, etc. And that data is just from one state. So 160 billion records from just one state, and that's every month, right? And you're trying to analyze all that. Now imagine you're in that situation, you're trying to create a platform that can do that. You know, that's a lot of data coming in real time, and it's hard, if not impossible, to physically buy enough hard drives, let alone set them up in a way that is performant or cost effective. You know, they were doing research on their old platform, and a single query to examine a section of interstate highway over a 24-hour period took 90 minutes. Batching just 10 billion records could take a whole month. Now imagine you're in that situation trying to do analysis that takes, you know, 90 minutes for every single query. Now you've got a paper deadline coming up, and you've got insights that you want to share with people. And ultimately, your goal is to, you know, take this system, right? And I talked to just one state. But how can we scale that up to multiple states, to across the nation potentially? You know, that's a really powerful idea. So by moving to BigQuery, which is our managed data warehouse, which I'll talk a little bit about later, you know, that same query takes just 7 minutes instead of 90. The batching process for 10 billion records takes 5. Now HAL and the Joint Transportation Research Program are able to better provide recommendations to policymakers that have a real impact, that can save lives, reduce the number of accidents in our communities, and, you know, hopefully for everyone here, make our commutes faster. And, you know, this technology, that's just one example, right? This technology can be used for all sorts of questions. Just with that platform alone, you know, there's a question of how can we make highway work zones where, you know, 800 people die annually safer? How can we make, you know, smarter, more connected cities that are, you know, more walkable and better for people's lives? So I'm just going to ask you to take a moment right now and think, you know, what are the big problems that you could solve or make an impact on if you had access to petabytes at your fingertips? All right. You know, the impact of the cloud on our lives is real, and it's impacting every industry and sector, from drug development to hybrid work to high performance computing to retail to financial services to ad tech to clean energy. Yeah, it's a lot. It's every industry. So I talked a little bit about, you know, the cloud in general, but, you know, what is the Google Cloud Platform and what does that have to offer? Essentially what the Google Cloud Platform is it's a collection of services across a huge range of products and verticals. And that's everything from compute, so we can do, you know, containers, we can do high performance computing, we can do virtual machines, we can do hybrid, you know, running on premises, talking with cloud or multi-cloud, or storage, you know, scaling all the way to the exabytes, networking, which, you know, is extremely fast and also global, which is really crazy when you think about it, that, you know, if you're an entrepreneur standing up a service, a product, right, that you can take that product or service and then you can, you know, without ever having to be in another country or talk with somebody there, you can scale up a service that can serve your users in a different country, which is really quite crazy. And, you know, one of the most interesting things for me is kind of the platform services, specifically around data, right? I think we've talked a lot about today about the importance of data, you know, in our world, and what is going on there and why it's so important. And what we can see is that the world of data continues to grow. I talked about the scale of data that HOWL and JTRP were dealing with. The data is not getting smaller. If anything, it's becoming exponential. 175 zettabytes by 2025. That's a lot. That's a lot of petabytes. Crazy, right? So how do you actually manage that at scale? And that's where I talked a little bit about BigQuery earlier with relation to HOWL and Purdue, right? Is that BigQueries are managed at a warehouse where essentially it's scalable from the gigabyte level to the petabyte level. You can do extremely efficient queries there using standard SQL. It's all encrypted, durable, highly available across the world. And it works with real-time data. It's easy to use for machine learning as well, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And it has built-in visualization. I think we were talking earlier about Data Studio. That's our kind of free built-in tool for data visualization. And what's great about it, right, is that you don't really have to manage it much. It scales from 0 to 100 really fast. There isn't that much to do. You can just focus on, making better queries, making better decisions, improving your visualizations, etc. So moving on to the AI world, right? We talk about this massive amount of data that is out there, right? And what is that data being used for? Well, hopefully it's being used for AI and machine learning, right? And actually being used to drive better outcomes and operationalizing it. This is an enormous opportunity, and it's impacting every industry. Drug safety and development, genome analysis, product recommendations, fraud detection, logistics, research. These are all areas where people are leveraging AI. And for me, I say, wow, that's really great, but I'm not a machine learning engineer, not at all, right? I'm a former business major. I'm an IT person. I study a little bit of data, right? But the great thing with these tools is that you don't necessarily have to be. Just real quick here, these are just some examples of where AI is being used in a variety of different verticals. Like I said, with recommendation, with mortgage processing, how can we provide better services to universities, to constituents, etc. Going back real quick to making AI easy, how can we predict or train models using just SQL, right? I don't have to know Python, I don't have to know R, right? How can I make that as easy as possible? And BigQuery makes it possible. You can just, as you can see in this little animation here, just use a predict thing, and then boom, you've got the data there, and you can make visualizations out of it, and you can use it for whatever problem that you're trying to solve. But that's not all, right? There's a variety of different services that we have, whether that's pre-trained APIs, custom AI with AutoML, which is kind of a no-code approach to things. And then if you are a machine learning, developer, ML engineer, right, that we have very advanced toolkits to help make that model development as easy as possible. For examples of, the pre-trained APIs that are available, you've got translation, you've got speech to text. You can see in the little animation there that that's, I believe, our Vision 1 detecting that there's a car there. For the AutoML, one of the things that really excels with is, okay, great, I can see a car, right? But if I am, a auto insurance person, like how can I see that car, and then also can I predict, the cost to repair a car based off of all that data? So if you have the data, right, you can plug it into that system and actually build models that are built to solve the use cases that you're trying to solve. So for an example of that, there's a company called AES, that's AES. They're an energy company that has a bunch of wind farms, hundreds of wind turbines, right? And the problem that they're trying to solve is like, I want to repair these wind turbines have to be inspected annually. And how can I do that in a way that is scalable and saves time, right? So what they did is, and that process right now takes about 2 weeks, right? And so what they did is they took drones. They had those drones fly up close to all these windmills here, and there's a whole video on this that we'll show to you all at the end. And they're taking thousands of pictures of these wind turbines, and with that data, right, they were able to train a model that was able to detect cracks, defects, damage from lightning, etc., and recommend a best course of action. And just by doing that, they automatically reduce the amount of images that need to be reviewed by hand in half. And so that took the inspection time from 2 weeks down to 2 days. And what that means is that they're able to improve the reliability of their wind turbines, they're able to reduce costs, and they're able to make green energy cheaper. Right? So these are really powerful outcomes. Taking a step back and talking about the different career paths and areas where AI and ML can be used. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to be a ML engineer to really get value out of all of these features, right? You can be a product manager and you can use AI by essentially, taking queries, using natural language to get the answers that you want. There, you can be a data analyst and make predictions using just SQL. So there's really quite a lot of areas where you can employ AI and ML without necessarily even being a data scientist or an ML engineer. But for those who are those data scientists or ML engineers, or who aspire to be, like I said, we've got a huge suite of products and services around this. From, again, everything from no-code, low-code to making it easy to use, managed Jupyter notebooks to, GPU availability, training and deploying models, and then also iterating on them, to improve them. So I've talked a lot, and I want to, transfer this over to Charles. Charles, you ready to present?
Sure. Hey everyone, thanks again. I'm gonna share my screen here. All right, and hopefully everyone can see, and I realize it's always challenging to see screens like this with lots of text and buttons, but if for some reason you want me to stop or you've got any kind of questions, we'll try to facilitate those questions towards the end. And actually, I just realized the stopping might be kind of hard. So thanks so much for taking the time today. I want to start off by saying, and I didn't provide this information earlier, but I actually work as a faculty member at an institution. And it's funny because when I work with a lot of the PIs that I have the pleasure of working with, one thing we always run into is, where do we get started? How do we get started? And why do so many of these cloud environments often seem so unapproachable? And a lot of faculty and even students nowadays, especially those that are kind of aspiring in the realm of data science and machine learning, are sort of comfortable or used to using things like Colab. And so what I'd love to do at the time remaining is kind of tie some things together and even show you some ways that you can engage with Google Cloud. Because as many of the folks on this call have already sort of alluded to, data and analytics is really at the core of so much that Wesleyan and I get to hear about with our customers, and also just in terms of how we sort of move forward in the world with analyzing data and finding out new ways to make it available to people to grow within obviously their organizations and obviously share that data as well. So to start off with, what I'm looking at here is what we would refer to as kind of our cloud homepage. For those that are just curious about, again, all the buttons and all the things, a lot of this information is kind of administrative. So if you're not familiar with some of the metrics or billing, or you don't really have to worry about any of that stuff, that's okay. One thing that we're trying to sort of convey, I apologize.
Never fails. Every single call we've had, you're on mute, or a dog is in the background, or UPS showed up, or someone opened up a door. It's a guarantee.
Sorry. Yeah, perfect timing. So what we're looking at, again, I apologize, is really we're looking at, again, a lot of pieces and parts that make up what the Google Cloud is. As you can imagine, a lot of the information or a lot of the resources that you might want to find, can be accessible through a search at the top. So if I'm looking for, let's just say, data-related information, I can very quickly, again, search. It'll show me everything from the resources, meaning the compute resources that are available, all the way to different folders and projects and things like that. If I am interested in something like, let's just say COVID data or something that might be relevant for a new project that I want to explore, again, I can search that. And if you look down at the bottom, we actually have many of the public data sets that Westlin alluded to available. So you can go very quickly click on those assets and basically add them to what is your project. So for those of you that have data sets already that are interested in kind of pulling those into Google Cloud environment to do quick analysis through a notebook type environment or SQL or some combination of the two, again, all of the things that I'm showing you today are not unique to my environment. You can do them too. If I click on the Add Dataset option, it's going to take me to a screen, and hopefully everyone can now see this other screen, which shows you, again, this large list of public data sets. This is very much a theme that we see within institutions that we work with, where they either want to contribute to or utilize some of these public resources for their research, or just, again, kind of getting started with Google Cloud. As far as other things that we can do within Google Cloud, so I'm going to switch back over now. On the left-hand side, what we're looking at is, again, the list of all the services that are kind of available to you. If you want to jump right into a service like BigQuery, you can pin those sorts of things at the top. If you want to store information, maybe some of the files that you've got for your research project, again, you can use something like Google Cloud Storage to do that. You'll also be able to access something like a collab through our Vertex AI platform. And for those that really enjoy that Jupyter notebooks or hub type experience, again, all of that is accessible through Vertex AI. We have a relatively new feature called, or I should say platform component called Vertex AI Workbench, which is an enhanced version of Jupyter Hub. So if you really like what you see in Colab, Kaggle, some of the other notebook environments that are out there, I would highly recommend checking out the Workbench, because it allows you to tap into resources directly that you may not have direct access to through something like Colab. If we continue looking down the list here on the left-hand side, and there's a ton of information, so I won't spend a ton of time trying to go over every little bit of detail, you'll see everything from networking down to kind of monitoring the environment. And as we get further down, even some of our third-party or partner services like Elasticsearch, Neo4j. So if you want like graph analysis or graph database type functionality, or you want to use something like Databricks as part of your research, all of those things, again, can be deployed directly within your project here, meaning you don't have to go to a completely different cloud or environment to get those things set up. I'm going to take a little bit of time to talk about BigQuery, because so many of the research projects that myself and others at Google have been involved in start around data. And so we're just going to take a quick little tour of what BigQuery looks like for you as an end user or someone that's just kind of interested in getting engaged with data. And to start off with, I'm just going to go to what we refer to as our SQL workspace. This environment, again, is very much set up for you to do everything in your browser. So if you're kind of used to using desktop tools to manage database resources or data resources, you can still offer those same kind of experiences through many of the APIs that we have available. So if you like using BigQuery as a source, but you want to use R or some other kind of local IDE or something like that, that's still an option. What we're looking at, again, is purely web-driven. And one of the nice things about that, of course, is I can find really useful information really quickly. So if I want to find a data set that maybe has something to do with wiki pages, or if I want to look for, again, that COVID data set that I mentioned before, even with some poor spelling, again, I can find all that information just by searching. Much of the information, of course, could be restricted to your project. So if you're worried about sharing, genomes with someone that may not need to have access to your genomes, don't worry about that. Security is kind of covers that piece. But if, again, you are looking to use some of these resources for your project, and I'm going to pivot over again one more time. And I've got some queries just here to take a look at. So if I wanted to find, let's just say as an example, we've got some Wikipedia data here, and I want to count the number of times things like vandalism show up in particular pages. Again, all of these kind of public data sets, as you can tell, are accessible and very quickly retrieved. So again, we're not spending a ton of time, as Weston alluded to earlier, having to wait on the queries to return the data sets back. You're also going to notice a lot of other kind of buttons or functionality that exists within this environment. One of the first things I'll call out, which is so sort of natural for us in the research domain, is to take our data back to where we know, how we can use it best. And again, whether that's using something like R or perhaps even a local Jupyter Hub instance or something like that, you can absolutely save results, even schedule these queries to run and save those results to other areas like Google Cloud Storage, or save them to run and then save them as additional tables within BigQuery. All of those options are available. You're also going to notice on the right, we have this Explore Data option. And so for those that really like working kind of in that, more Sheets or Excel type of environment, you'll have that ability to, again, just jump right out into Sheets or right into an environment that might be more suitable for that. If you have a data set that you've kind of queried and it seems, reasonable for, let's say building visualizations or dashboards on, you can immediately click on that. It will take you directly into Data Studio. Now, what I've found, again, as someone who oftentimes is handed data I know very little about, I really like this experience because it allows me, without a ton of extra effort, to go and kind of further drill into perhaps some of the detail, maybe even present the data back to some of the colleagues I'm working with to make sure that we're all on the same page about what's being presented. Again, this is a completely free tool. It does use a lot of caching behind the scenes too. So if you're worried about, wow, the query I just ran, even though it was a relatively large query, came back in a minute or two, most of the data that you retrieve in these requests are sort of then still served up in sort of memory or cache. You can also save the results. So if, let's say I like this visualization or I change it to a different visualization type, again, we can do a lot just within this environment and still share those resources with our colleagues. So if at this point I said I'm going to save this analysis here, much like other Google resources, I can then just go click and add someone to this particular dashboard or report. And Westlin or Chris or others could just go easily access it from their Data Studio environment. Now I want to jump back over to our BigQuery environment here. One thing, again, we often get asked about is, well, if I'm a SQL kind of heavy person, I like to use SQL a lot to do a lot of data analysis or exploration. What does that look like for me if I'm used to using, again, some of the tools or resources that are provided by my institution today that may, again, exist as files locally? So let's just say I want to do a very quick, simple analysis of the number of records that are available within a public data set. If I run that, again, the results come back relatively quickly. It even tells me how much data I'm actually processing. And for those that have heard a lot about, well, when I use a cloud environment, what does that mean for my budget? How do I sort of assess what my future research project will cost? A lot of the things that you'll see within Google Cloud give you that information out of the gate. So if I hadn't run this query before, it would actually try to tell me ahead of time how much data I was going to process. And then if it was my own data set, perhaps even tell me or give me an idea how much it would cost. So if I'm looking at petabytes worth of data as an example, and I want to be very strategic about what data I pull back so that I'm not, again, over kind of extending or charging, again, this resource on the top right-hand corner will always be available for you to look at. Now, if I said, again, I want to look at a different data set, and in this case, we're looking at Shakespeare characters who speak the most, you can start seeing that within BigQuery, we're able to do what oftentimes, again, might be perceived as more natural language or sentiment-based kind of analysis through other tools. And so again, we try to emphasize the fact that even though you might choose to use a notebook as an example, or use Python to do some of that analysis, the SQL that's provided and even the models that can be accessed through BigQuery directly allow you to do that sort of, again, kind of more NLP-driven or NLP-like analysis directly within BigQuery. And one other example that I always like to showcase, let me cut back over here.
Charles, I'm just impressed you got a literature reference in there in your queries. I'm pretty impressed by that. Tying everything back together again. Nice job.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So for those that are more perhaps familiar with things like regex, or that's kind of part of that process of analysis that you use, again, we do support those sorts of analyses. You're going to notice here in the top right-hand corner, it looks like this query is going to actually process 4.4 terabytes of data. And again, when we look at the actual analysis here, again, we're trying to look at the most viewed Wikipedia articles that start with G, end with E, and contain 2 O's. So it's a pretty unique sort of query, and I'm obviously limiting my results, meaning if there are over 100, I won't see any more than that 100. But again, if I run this, it's going to also show me the number of stages that BigQuery, sort of takes to get that data back. This is extremely important also to sort of understand, because BigQuery as an architecture, as a database architecture or data architecture, is sort of unique. Unlike a lot of other more traditional database systems, it really kind of stores most of its data in sort of fragments, or can store them in more fragmented forms. And so it can, again, process it in steps. And so again, this query is taking much longer to run than our other queries, and we're able to kind of analyze that as it happens down below. And I promise the end result is fascinating. The results of this, though, we're actually going to save as a saved query. So once this is back, we'll actually, I'll just go ahead and save it now. And I'm just going to call this, starts with G, ends with E, has 2 O's. Right? And I could share this within my project. So if I'm doing a research project on published literature, or I want to share this publicly, maybe I've shared a data set, maybe it's journalism, maybe it's science-based, could be any biology, could be anything. I can share that, and this particular query or set of data even could be made available. So I'm going to save this just for myself, because I want to make sure that the query actually returns some data. And hopefully I didn't break our big query. I'm just joking. It's actually a pretty resource-intense query. But one of the things that will happen once the results come back is I'll be able to see them down below. The other thing that's also kind of interesting is you'll notice that you have these sort of share and schedule options. So again, if it is a query like the one we're experiencing right now that does take a little bit longer to run, I could create this as my long-running G and E query. I can specify the time in which I want it to run, even the destination for those results. And so if I have to run this every day on, let's say, like a newly created data set that might come from my lab or might come from a news resource, and then I want to store it as a table in a database or as a file on GCS, again, I can do all of that. One thing that I didn't go into yet, but I'm going to let this query keep running, is some of this kind of more, again, notebooks environment that some of you might be used to. So Vertex AI is kind of the equivalent of a more sort of enterprise version in a way of the Colab that you're used to. So allows us to store and manage models, allows us to store and manage data sets, even task people with doing labeling. So if you have a set of individuals that need to label text data as an example, and you need to store those labels, Vertex AI is the place within Google Cloud that would allow you to do that. So again, you're going to notice some things within the left-hand side here that aren't natively, again, available in something like a Colab or a Kaggle. And these things, again, are all can be managed securely, just like the BigQuery environment that we mentioned before. When it comes to data sets, you're going to notice that, again, you can store all sorts of different data sets, whether they're text, images, again, all of these things are available. To add a new data set, it actually walks you through the process of defining what that data set looks like. So if you're unsure about, well, I've got a data set that's kind of text, maybe it's a little bit of text and imaging that I need to store, again, it will walk you through that. You can decide how you want to classify that. And if it's, let's say, an image as an example, you can kind of choose a model right out of the gate to actually do a kind of initial sort of take at what the objects are, detection of the objects. All right. And I know I've gone through a lot, so I want to leave you all with the results from our query that have now been analyzed. So hopefully, you guys all see that everything that I just went through is fairly accessible within Google Cloud. I know there's a lot of information here, so we got a little bit of time left to make sure we answer any questions you might have.
And there's levels of exposure you get. So the 3 to 6 hours and the actual digital badge we talked about, to getting to this point where you're working in the console on a regular basis. Charles is a super admin. He sees everything. Your students would see smaller portions of different aspects of things. But querying data, building these kind of models is central to a lot of what we talk about with schools. And it is not just IT professionals or engineering students. Your business students, your finance majors want to have this level of knowledge or need this level of knowledge going into their careers. So getting exposure now in a small 3 to 6 hour window gives them that knowledge to go forward. It's not just about the dashboards, right? Everyone wants to talk about the dashboards. Well, where's the data coming from? What that kind of process, that kind of knowledge? Katie talked about it in her background and her team, what they're looking at. Yes, they're looking at dashboards. They're building them for me. I'm their customer. How is that happening? Katie's teams are building those. Weslin's built me dashboards. She's built the entire sales team dashboards just based in BigQuery and Data Studio, where I'm like, I need to get this answer. She's like, I can handle that for you. And she goes through it. Now she's a cloud engineer. She's got her certifications. So it's a level of who's building the data, who's working with it. Is it me or is it Weslin or is it somebody else in that kind of process there? So there's levels of engagement we want to work with you and your students around, saying, okay, where do they want to go? What outcome are they trying to drive towards? What level of information do they need? How do we help them get there? That's really our overall goal. Yeah. So Weslin, you want to share a couple things real quick before we wrap up?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really cool too about BigQuery, right, is we talk about this massive amount of data, right? But that data is not always batch, right? That data can be coming in real time, from a bunch of different data sources. That data might need to be cleaned or processed in some way, and so it's a problem, but it's also an opportunity when you think about like what you can do with that kind of data, from like IoT devices, right? How can we take the data from devices that are out there in the field and then, use that data to have better crop yields or something. It's really quite interesting, all the stuff that you can do with it. Just real quick, I will get the presentation back up. One of the things that Charles touched on, right, is all the different public data sets, right? And Charles just got to like the tip of the iceberg here. There's like over 200 different public data sets for all kinds of things, whether that's census tract data, the Shakespeare stuff, bike data, Bitcoin data, if anyone's into like crypto and stuff. There's really quite a number of different resources. The Census Bureau, like we were talking about earlier. So a couple other tools, right? We talked a little bit about Colab. Colab's a great resource for folks. It's free. You can also actually run Colab in GCP through the Google Cloud Marketplace as well. So wanted to make that note. And then we want to do a quick discussion on RadLab. Charles, you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. Yeah, so one thing that we've definitely come across in engaging with faculty is this need to kind of deploy, again, an architecture without kind of starting from scratch. And so what RadLab is really it's designed as a way to sort of quick start a development or sort of data science type environment for researchers. It's written largely in Terraform, so when you go to deploy this environment, the script is customizable that we provide, and it allows you to do things like again, set up a notebooks environment that's secure, or that may have, again, with it kind of pre-installed or pre-sort of allocated data sets. When you look at it from the genomics perspective, there are, again, sort of pre-deployed things like FastQC and Cromwell and GATK. And then from an HPC perspective, one of the things we've got coming is things for, again, quick deployment with solutions like Slurm. So RadLab is very much an accelerated way to get into the cloud, using Terraform as a sort of backbone, and very much something that we're seeing a lot of research organizations gravitate towards, and it allows them to kind of, again, build out a blueprint for what other development or kind of research initiatives might be in the future.
All right, thanks for sharing, Charles. I wanted to add a couple other areas to explore. We talked a lot about data, right? But there's a lot of other things that are, important about Google Cloud, specifically around user data, right? You own your data, The Privacy Resource Center goes into a lot of that. Security, all data is encrypted by default. And the white paper talks about all the different things that Google is doing from the hardware level down to the data center, all the different layers there. Our zero trust philosophy, compliance. If you are trying to if you're like an entrepreneur and you need PCI compliance for whatever application that you're doing, or if you are doing medical research and you need HIPAA compliance, we can help with that. Also, our sustainability goals, and how we run is kind of the cleanest cloud out there, and our AI principles, which are incredibly important as well. So
excellent.
That's everything from me. On to you.
Thank you, Wesleyan. We are right about 10 minutes before we leave. Any follow-up questions, concerns? Real quick, everyone's been asking me, hey, you're going to share the deck with us. Absolutely. Let's make sure we do that. Will my contact information be on there? Absolutely. Again, I'm your clearinghouse for questions, concerns, follow-up. We would love to work with you all. Again, establish where we can potentially do adjacent resources to what you all do. Get your students exposure to it. What's the value of working with Google? What is Google looking for in careers, right? Because